RPE, or rate of perceived exertion, is an objective measure of performance, not how you feel. When we talk about RPE, I think a common misconception is people use their feelings a little bit too much rather than treating it as an objective measure of performance. That's right, Luna. RPE stands for rate of perceived exertion. How hard was that set, particularly the final rep of that set? It's not about how the weight feels necessarily. You can not feel great and still perform well. You can feel great and perform like crap. You can feel crap, perform crap. Did I already say that one? You can feel bad, perform crap, feel bad, perform well, feel good, perform crap, feel good, perform well. I think this is where the idea of combining the reps in reserve idea with RPE is quite useful. Treating it as a scale of how many more reps you could have achieved or how many more kilos you could have added versus how the weight felt or how you felt subjectively. We want to add as much objectivity to it as possible. For example, we know a 10 RPE is essentially a 10 out of 10 set, but to add a little bit more to that, like another layer, it's essentially no more reps could have been achieved and no more weight could have been achieved. Now, the original RPE scale only had full integer jumps, so 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then over time, this was expanded out to 6, 6.5. So we've got half steps, 7.5, 8.5, 9.5, 2 or 9.5, 8.5, however you prefer to say it. But this essentially gives us a bit more of an ability to describe what's going on with our performance. So for example, 9 RPE is you could have performed one more repetition, 8 RPE, 2 more repetitions. So essentially you take your 10 RPE and subtract how many more reps you could have done. This gives you your RPE for that set. Where 0.5s become useful is just add a little bit more context. So if you definitely could have done 2 more reps, maybe done a third, that would be a 7.5 RPE. The only one that we like to use a little bit differently is a 9.5 RPE. So rather than this being maybe I could have done another rep, instead we prefer to use that as maybe I could have done another couple of kilos. So this could have been, the same number of reps for 2.5 kilos more. But where I think a lot of people lose the utility of RPE is forgetting that it needs to be viewed as objectively as possible as a rating of your performance. And this is where filming your sets so that you can watch them back is really useful. But it's quite easy to forget that we should basically take our first impression. So immediately after you've done a set, try and create that moment and that practice of instantly rating the RPE of the set. And then a good habit that I would like to get people into is when you watch it back, say you rate the set at like an 8 RPE, you watch it back and on watching it, you think it was maybe easier than that. You could have performed more reps. I would generally advise only adjusting your initial assessment by half an RPE rather than a full RPE. Even if you think it was more like a 7, for example, I would still rate it as a 7.5 so that you can use that to help build momentum over the course of a training block rather than calling it a 7. Maybe you increase your working max or your training max or what have you, your estimated 1 rep max, whatever you like to use. And then in the second week, you end up stalling a little bit because you've not had time to kind of grow into the block and build momentum. Yeah, I think that's the biggest takeaway when it comes to using RPE is it's not necessarily about how you feel. You could have. We've all had sessions where we've turned up to the gym. We've maybe not slept as well as we would like. Maybe nutrition hasn't been great. Maybe we're not 100% hydrated as well as we could be. But you can still come into those sessions and crush it, and maybe you hit like a rep PB and it's a lower RPE than you would have thought. Just because you might not necessarily feel great doesn't mean you can't still perform well. Sometimes you tick all of those boxes. You've had the perfect sleep, perfect food, perfect hydration, you're in a good mood, you feel well rested, you've had low stress, and the weight just doesn't move the way it should for whatever reason. these scenarios happen quite often. So it's sort of trying to mentally detach from how you feel physically and emotionally. It's not, these things aren't important. We should absolutely take stock of these things and track these things when we're training. If you're consistently in a terrible mood and not sleeping well, potentially, you're probably not going to be recovering very well. And it could even be reflective of your program either has too much volume or too high intensity, or there's something not quite right. If other variables are controlled, like you're going to bed at a good time, but you're just not sleeping well, these are all factors that we should absolutely take into consideration. I'm not saying fuck your feelings, they don't matter at all. What I'm saying is try to detach those feelings from how you try to objectively rate your performance. And this is one thing where velocity-based training has become really popular, because it is, again, a more objective measure. But again, I think with any of these tools, RPE, velocity, all of these things, they are only as useful as our ability to implement them, which takes practice. For example, if you allow your technique to degrade and go to shit in order to try and fudge your RPE or your bar speed, which is really common right now, that is, in the moment, great. You've got that instant gratification of, oh, this is telling me my working max has gone up or what have you. But by the time you actually get to testing, you see people underperform on the platform, because what they've done is they've artificially inflated their estimated 1 rep maxes by letting technique degrade to the point where when they do put their 9.5, 10 RP squat on their back, everything falls apart and falls to shit. So instead, we don't want to try and force progress through underreporting RPEs. That's why I suggest only adjusting your initial assessment by half an RPE point at most, to just guarantee that we don't underreport, sort of overinflate numbers, and then end up selling ourselves short by essentially fudging the numbers and lying to ourselves about our capabilities. It's better to err on the side of caution and being more conservative with our estimates, and using RPE as objectively as possible. This is a skill, but when you watch your videos back, imagine it's someone else. It's not you. It can be helpful to get someone else to cast their eye over it, but at the end of the day, they don't have that. You have the objective sort of view of how fast it looks like that bar move, for example. This is, again, where velocity stuff is really useful. It does add that layer of objective data to it. But there is an element of, and I'm going to say, how the weight feels. I don't mean, whether you feel good or bad. I mean how the weight feels on your back, how the going through that rep felt to you, if you felt like you were in control. So this is where I mean, like, it's not that feelings don't matter at all. It's just how you feel coming into the session maybe is not as important. We've all done reps where we unrack the weight and it feels really heavy, but then we still get the right number of reps at the right RPE. Sometimes you unrack a weight, it feels light on your back, it feels great, you walk it out, you feel really confident, but then you don't hit the rep target that you think you should have. So it's not, we don't need to, it's a difficult one because it's very nuanced. Using this correctly is very nuanced, and it does take practice. Now, the only way you're going to practice it is, or get better, is by practicing. So even if you don't run a program that is RPE based, maybe you use percentages, still get into the habit of trying to track and rate your RPEs for each set so that you can improve this skill over time. Use the reps in reserve model of using RPE, and if in doubt, err on the side of caution. It's better to undershoot than overshoot over time, because then you can build momentum throughout the course of one training block or multiple training blocks, rather than trying to force progression through overestimating your capabilities and underreporting your RPEs.